Let me ask you something. How many times in your life have you felt so close to progress, feeling like you're on the verge, threshold towards something new, and then somehow everything fell apart? You were motivated, you were capable, you had the right circumstances, you were on track, but yet something inside of you quietly pulled the brakes and the opportunity were not really capitalized on. Hi, I'm Olof Nilsson, clinical psychologist, and today we are talking about 5 signs that you are self-sabotaging without even realizing it. Self-sabotage isn't about weakness or lack of discipline. It's usually about protection and old patterns, old emotional patterns trying to keep you safe from discomfort, uncertainty, risk, rejection, embarrassment, and so on. But the problem is, those patterns often keeps us playing small in life rather than actually going for the things we want. So if you care about personal development, you care about success, you care about inner growth, then understanding these patterns is kind of a non-negotiable. The first one is overthinking as a form of avoidance. You overthink as a way to avoid taking real action. It feels productive, it feels like you're thinking about real things, you're planning, you're researching, you're preparing, and that can be good to some degree, but in reality, overthinking is a very sophisticated pause button. You're not lazy, you're not unmotivated, you maybe have all ambition and drive to actually do things, but you're kind of self-sabotaging with overthinking instead of taking real steps, and this kind of keeps you stuck. And the thing is, you're always going to have to learn everything through experience anyways, so it doesn't matter really how much you plan and think about it, you're still going to have to take the same steps and go through the same loops anyways. So what you're actually doing is that you're trying to avoid the emotional risk, the emotional feeling of doing the thing. Taking action forces you to face uncertainty, it gives you real feedback about your performance, your capabilities, it kind of asks you to take responsibility, and sometimes it actually also requires you to step into a little bit of success and progress, which can feel vulnerable. So instead of doing that, it kind of can be easier to kind of prepare for it in eternity through overthinking. So the mind says, let's think about this a little bit more, convinces you to be really smart about it, to not leave anything to chance or to luck, but in reality, you're just kind of making yourself stuck. The number 2 is that you set so high standards for yourself that you're kind of guaranteed to fail. Perfectionism is a very socially accepted form of self-sabotage. When you aim for perfection, you don't have to finish, you don't have to be seen, you don't have to take risk of criticism. You get to stay behind the idea of what you could be without actually stepping into it. I've seen so many intelligent, highly talented people with huge potential for kind of high potential stuff block their own success simply because good enough feels too vulnerable. And the truth is, nobody is perfect when you start, so aiming for perfectionism is actually not very authentic. Authentic and real would be actually show up with where you are at the moment and then take it from there. And it is self-sabotage because things will take much longer than if you kind of just started doing something imperfect and continuing from there, getting real life feedback, instead of trying to kind of get things perfect the first time. The third one is choosing comfort over progress. It's a little bit like the former one, that you kind of choose procrastination and emotional avoidance to stay in familiar routines that is kind of keeping you back, or choosing short-term relief over long-term results. The mind is wired to hate discomfort. It is wired to hate the unknown or uncertainty. So kind of stepping into the things that are actually good for you kind of all require that. But your mind and your patterns, they tell you that this is something you should avoid. So it is a bit of a conflict. But if you do this on a regular, constant basis, that you always choose short-term relief over long-term progress, then you are definitely self-sabotaging. Last thing I want to leave you with on this point is to kind of leave an open question about how much is comfort or avoiding discomfort kind of your default way of making decisions. And if it is a very default way that you make decisions, let's just simmer in that question and that answer and see and ponder a little bit what that kind of does to you and the things that you really want in life. Number 4 is gravitating towards and having loyalty towards things that are actually hurting you. You gravitate towards that which feels familiar and where you have a loyalty instead of what's healthy. And this is a big one. If you grew up with chaos, you might unconsciously recreate chaos. If you grew up feeling unseen, you might choose relationships where you're still invisible, or you have this kind of lack of self-respect or what you're getting from the other person. If you grew up having to overperform, you might choose environments where you're always proving yourself. The familiar might feel safe, it might feel like who you are, because you have kind of learned to kind of play that role, and maybe you have actually become quite good at it. So now you have loyalty and you're being good at something which is actually an kind of dysfunctional, unhealthy pattern for you, but still it's kind of sometimes a little bit feels better to do things which are dysfunctional, which we're good at, than doing something new, which is healthy, but we feel more like beginners. And short term, this might feel a little bit good because maybe you're doing something that you're good at, maybe you're getting a little bit of validation from family, work situations, which are actually quite unhealthy and dysfunctional, but still short term you kind of get validated for it. But in the long run, of course, the more you kind of engage and build your life around unhealthy dysfunctional patterns, of course, consequences are going to be in alignment with that. Number 5 is maybe my favorite one. It is that you argue for your limitations. You tell yourself stories like, I'm not that kind of person, I could not do that, I don't have what it takes. And they're not facts, they are your beliefs, and they're very old beliefs. But I find it so interesting when people kind of defend their limitations, try to protect them. I mean, to a large degree, it is to kind of protect yourself and give reasons for not doing things like stepping into the unknown, going for more, kind of having to put yourself out there to really test yourself and really test your abilities and, meet life head on. So it does become like a protective excuse. But nevertheless, I still find it a bit strange to take such a defensive stand against your own best self-interest. Rather, it would be better to say things like, I don't know that yet, this thing scares me and I feel very out of my waters, but I want to do this, so I'm going to give it a try. This seems crazy, I barely believe myself, nobody believes me, but kind of my gut feeling says that this is something that I should do and it feels really exciting to think about, so I am just going to go for it. Life is short. That to me seems like a more inspirational and authentic stance. So self-sabotage isn't the enemy, it's a signal, it's a teacher, it's showing you where you're a little bit afraid, where you're a little bit hesitant, where you have been conditioned by your past, and where you are living by outdated emotional rules and beliefs. And the moment that you can see this pattern a little bit more clearly, you can start to choose a little bit differently, not perfectly, that is not what we're talking about. Life is messy, progress is messy, we didn't get a handbook kind of being born, but still with this kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of approach and doing it consciously, it is still going to be a lot better than running around in circles in self-sabotage. If this resonated, subscribe to the channel. Everything I create here is designed to help you with things such as understanding yourself, personal development, breaking old patterns, and kind of build a life that actually fits you right now, so that you can be a little bit less weighed down, pulled down by your past and your old beliefs, patterns, emotions, and so on, and you can focus a little bit more on what's ahead of you. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in another video.